welcome to In the Wake of the Vikings Part 3. In Part 3, we continue our exploration of Svalbard, spend a day at sea en route to Jan Mayen Island, a visit to Jan Mayen Island, followed by another day at sea en route to our first stop in Iceland, Husivik. And while we were supposed to continue exploring the northern reaches of Svalbard, our captain and expedition team leader made a decision to move a bit further south to avoid dense fog that had formed over the northern part of Svalbard. So with that in mind, our first stop that day was at Poolepynten. Poolepynten is a small spit of land named after British whaler Jonas Poole and is about 1.5 kilometers long. Poole's Point is located in the Straits of Hornsundfjorden and is within the borders of the Hornsundfjorden National Park. There's not really much left on the flat, narrow headland other than an overnight shelter used by scientists and the Sysselmannen. Sysselmannen is the chief of police, sheriff, governor, park ranger of Svalbard. There's also a navigational marker and a small triangular boathouse. We were told that occasionally a polar bear will wander by and maybe a few reindeer. While we saw a piece of reindeer fur, we certainly didn't see any bears. There was, however, this thundering herd of walruses. The walrus is a large pinnipedal type animal, and while it can be very graceful and fast-moving in the water, its size and weight and style of locomotion makes it very sluggish on land. Poole's Point is a known gathering spot for a colony of walruses. There were about 9 members of that colony sunning themselves in the unusually warm and sunny weather. After spending considerable time watching these large creatures conserving their energy, we decided to do a little bit more exploration of the beach. I'm not sure what caused these tracks, but I'm going with the theory that it was a walrus who drug himself up on the beach and then down off of the beach. Well, that's my theory at least, and I'm going to stick to that one. Elsewhere, as we continued our beach combing, we found some evidence of Poole's Point original, reason for being, a few whale bones, and a few what I thought were walrus bones. And these, what I think are fishing net weights, scattered around the beach. And all that wood and debris that we had come to expect on the Svalbard beaches, washed in from Russia. To the Zodiac landing, I spotted these tracks. Bear, Bigfoot, don't know. And this sign. Poole's Point is one of several beaches in Svalbard where the government of Svalbard asks that you not clean up litter from the beaches. The idea is that scientists will come along and collect all the plastic and junk that floats in and try to identify where it is coming from. So after our visit with the walrus colony, it was time to don our life jackets, get back on our Zodiacs, and make the trip back to the Silver Endeavour. And once the boots were off and the life jackets stowed, it was time to check back in and climb the stairs back to our room. Saying goodbye to Poolepynten, we were on our way for our last stop in Svalbard, Alkhornet Mountain. Alkhornet Mountain is sometimes called Bird Mountain, even though the literal translation means Moose Mountain. The mountain is 1,404 feet in elevation, or about 428 meters, and is on the western coast of Spitsbergen, near the entrance of Isfjorden. The mountain and the area in which it sits has been designated as an important bird area, and up to 10,000 breeding pairs nest on the rocky cliffs of the mountain. All of that bird guano makes for lush greenery in spots and provides good grazing ground for reindeer and denning sites for the Arctic fox. There were 3 hikes being offered by the expedition team today, and we opted for the longer walk, which ended up being about 3.73 miles or 6 kilometers. Many of those bird pairs are guillemots. The guillemot chicks spend 4 or 5 weeks on the cliffs where they are hatched, being fed by both mother and father. At the end of those 4 or 5 weeks, the underdeveloped chicks will still leap from their rocky perch and tumble down the side of the mountain toward the sea. The father of the chicks will be waiting and guide them toward the water, where he will train them to fish for themselves. Even though their wings are underdeveloped, the chicks are blessed with an abundance of down, and the little fur balls most often arrive safely at the bottom of the cliff. In addition to all those birds, we saw several reindeer. Here's one grazing inexplicably on the side of the mountain where there is little greenery, where he could have been down here eating this much more lush greenery. Regardless, we spotted several of his cousins sensibly grazing down below. hiked the rugged landscape, we were given reminders not only of the life in the area, but the harsh environment as well, as marked by this eerily intact reindeer skeleton looking just like a tiny dragon. As many mentioned, there are Arctic foxes in this area, and although we didn't see any, some of our fellow passengers on a different hike did indeed spot an Arctic fox. Zodiac ride, and we were back on the Silver Endeavour. A quick change, and it was time for dinner. Dinner tonight would be again at the restaurant. More about the restaurant in Part 5. Tonight was supposed to be an Arctic kiss party. What that amounted to was wear your parka up on the top deck, Deck 10, and stand with the cold wind blowing in your face. Well, the captain decided that there was just a little too much wind tonight to do that, so the party was moved to the observation lounge. One of the crew acted as the DJ, and the rest of the crew cut up and danced a little bit for us. This because we could all sleep in, as the next day was a day at sea. Today was simply a relaxing day at sea. Nothing much to do other than hit the treadmill for a while, get a nice cappuccino from the Arts Cafe, or maybe go up to Deck 9 to the well-stocked library, or attend a couple of the lectures. But soon enough it was time for, well, dinner. And dinner tonight was at the grill. And while there is no upcharge for the grill, you do have to make a reservation, and that is easily done before your trip or while on board. After a bit of carousing around, it was time to get ready for bed, and the next day for our last day in Norwegian waters. And the next day found us at Mayen Island, which is 5 degrees above the Arctic Circle, has an active volcano at one end of the island, but the volcano was shrouded in mist and fog as we sailed by on our way to the other end of the island. There are about 20 to 40 inhabitants on the island at any given time in a small settlement. Most of those inhabitants are Norwegian National Forces personnel and meteorologists. They staff a large meteorological station and a Norwegian maritime radio communications operation. There is one unpaved airstrip on the island, which is about 1,585 meters long, or 5,200 feet for those of us that are metrically impaired. The island has no ports or harbors, and only offshore anchorages are available. We were met shoreside by a lieutenant colonel in the Norwegian Armed Forces, who greeted us and welcomed us to the island. When talking to the colonel, we found that he was also the military commander, chief of police, head park. After talking to the colonel a bit, we went out and did a lap around the beach area where we had landed. The only other 2 excursions available were a medium hike and a long hike, but in this case, because of the weather, we opted for the Wimpy Beachcombing Walk. There were a few structures where we were at: a shelter, a very sturdy-looking doghouse, a boathouse, a generator house, and, of course, the accommodations. The settlement is somewhere on the other side of these hills, and the settlement is connected to several of these landing sites by roads. As we explored, we came across the now familiar but always amazing whale bones littering the beach. And the detritus and flotsam that we now expected to see. As well as some unusual looking rocks that were chucked over by the volcano on the other end of the island. Mount Bjornafjorden is an active volcano and last erupted in 1970 and again in 1985. Some of the rock fields, either placed there by the volcano or tumbling down the mountain, not sure which, almost appear to be arranged like a Zen garden. Jan Mayen was once a Dutch whaling community. On a hill overlooking the beach called Dutchman's Hill is a cross that marks the burial site for 6 Dutch sailors. And when we had had enough, it was time to head back to the ship by Zodiac. After a couple of hours with the last Zodiac returned and stowed away, it was time to leave Jan Mayen Island. And later that evening, with Jan Mayen receding in the rear view mirror, it was time once more for dinner at the restaurant. After dinner, it was time to head up to the observation lounge for a little entertainment and chocolate delight night. Chocolate delight night is an extravaganza of all things chocolate. Most of it could be eaten and enjoyed, while some of it was for decorative purposes only and would be preserved and trotted out for the next chocolate delight night. Chocolate display was almost too much for the senses, and some of the treats offered looked almost too good to dig into. Please note, I said almost. Definitely a bit decadent, I thought it might be my duty to rack up a few million calories, in the name of research of course, while sipping on my chocolate martini. Well, it wasn't long before chocolate overload set in, and it was time to trundle on back to our suite to get ready for the next day. And today would be another leisurely day at sea as we made way towards Iceland. Now, the Silver Endeavour is a ship with 220 passengers maximum, and although certainly a luxurious ship, size, capacity, and number of venues dictates that there is less to do and fewer places to do those things. Many of the things to do rightly revolved around the expedition side of the cruise, with more enrichment lectures and fewer of the standard cruise things. But regardless, I would have to say there is enough to do. You can always go to the library and grab a board game, go sit in the observation lounge. Here we are indulging in a bit of head-to-head Scrabble. If Scrabble's not your thing, there are plenty of other games. And for lunch today, we had the Seafood Abundance Lunch. Essentially, this amounted to just bunches and bunches of seafood piled high atop the deck that covered the pool. The regular salad and dessert bar were also open, as well as the normal things from the grill were available. As said, enrichment lectures presented by the expedition team, and we attended this lecture about the Norsemen.
Even with these new beautiful cities, a couple of days from...
Later on that evening, and it was once more time for dinner. And again, this time at the restaurant, where we enjoyed dinner with new friends Don and Ta. Check out our complete dining and drink guide in part 5. After dinner, it was time for a little music with pianist Roloff, and then time for bed in anticipation of our landing the next day in Iceland. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out part 4 when released. It's all about Iceland. Please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, and help us grow this channel. More on the way, and please check out some of our past videos. Comments and corrections are welcome. And as always, happy and safe travels from T's Cruise and Travel Muse.